On today's show, gonna be joined by another diehard Clipper fan who you might recognize to take another trip down memory lane. Some of the biggest what ifs in Clipper history. And oh boy, we can go on for hours, but we're gonna try to make it into a 30-minute episode. Draft what ifs, potential injury what ifs, and some almost trades that we made and almost didn't make on today's Locked On Clippers.
You are Locked On Clippers, your daily Los Angeles Clippers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, sir. You are locking in with the Clips. Thank you for making Locked On Clippers the first listen of your day, your team every day. I'm your host, Darian Vaziri, born and raised in LA and going into my 19th season as a Clipper fan this fall. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Dime Dropper Pod and subscribe to my own YouTube channel, Dime Dropper, for even more LA Clipper and NBA content. And Locked On Clippers, free and available on all your favorite podcast platforms, including YouTube, where I want you to let me know what you think are some of the biggest what ifs in Clipper history. What are the ones that sting the most that you wish could have and would have happened? And joining me to talk about all those, this is the second time we've seen him here on Locked On Clippers in my reign as host. The first one was to talk about the 06 Clippers before I went to Qatar. And since I am set to go to the East Coast on the week that you'll be hearing this, we had to pre-record some episodes, and no one better than Chris Wylde of the LA Clipcast to come talk what ifs. Chris, welcome back.
What's up, Dime? How you doing, man?
I'm doing okay, hanging in there. The offseason's been very stress-free, so it's been nice to be a little more relaxed.
Hey, Kawhi looks healthy. Kawhi looks healthy.
Yes, and slim. How about you?
Yeah, Finn, I'm good, man. I actually put on about 5 or 10 LBs during the offseason. Just beer and smash burgers.
Were you bulking?
Yeah, I'm bulking up. I'm getting ready for the season.
There we go. But let's get right to it. So the first category we're going to look at is draft what ifs. So the first one I can think of, and you are going to definitely have a better lens on this than me, Michael Olowakandi.
The candy man.
Yeah, the candy man can. The number one pick, 98 draft, could have taken Dirk, could have taken Pierce, could have taken Vince Carter. We go with the candy man. You were a fan at this point, weren't you?
Yeah, so my first season as a season ticket holder was Olowakandi's last season, probably in the league, which was 2002. I had an Olowakandi jersey that I got autographed from Candy. Candy literally waved us onto the floor at the last game of regular season. I think he was shocked anyone was wearing his jersey. And he waved me and Hank onto the floor and he signed our jerseys. Hank still has his Candyman jersey, but I threw it out in disgust after some, Clipper heartbreak game at Staples Center. So, yeah, Candyman, huge bust. Look, I think only in the past 30 years, who is a bigger number one bust? With that Blazers pick, what's his name?
Odin?
Odin.
That may be a little bit unfair, to Odin. He had actual real injuries his first season.
Yeah.
I think Anthony Bennett would be the best choice. 2013 first overall pick to Cleveland.
Right. Dude, I Candyman, it just blows your mind when you just told me they could have had Dirk, who's a franchise guy, one of the last franchise players that spent didn't Dirk spend his entire career with the Mavs?
Yeah, 21 years.
Yeah, and even when Nash left him, still managed to get a ring without Nash. Dude, obviously Dirk would have been better. Paul Pierce would have been better. Vince Carter would have been exponentially better.
So let me ask you this. We get one of those guys. How much do you think that changes things for us? Because it obviously will make us great in the short term, but with Donald Sterling, would we have been able to keep those guys? Because if we get Vince Carter, that means the dunk show that happened in Toronto happens in LA. So
take a Vince Carter. He stayed at Toronto for at least 5 years before he went to New Jersey, right?
At least six.
Yeah, so 6 years. So you take any of those guys, they're going to stay with the Clippers unless Diamond Don Sterling really craps the bed, which obviously he's known to do. But Dirk or Vince are going to be there for 5-6 years. Obviously, Dirk, you could just build the entire team around. I mean, I guess nobody really knew what he was, but maybe
Yeah, I
they
was gonna
did.
say.
And I don't know what Candy did in college. Obviously, he had some lights out number to be the number 1 overall pick. Clearly crushed in college, but he sucked in the NBA, dude.
Yeah, I mean, if we get Dirk, it's interesting to think about that. It may have taken a couple of years, but you would like to think we make a playoffs with one of these guys, maybe at least,
100%.
right? Yeah,
Definitely Dirk, probably Vince Carter, probably Paul Pierce, although obviously Paul Pierce needed to assemble that big 3.
right.
But very soon after that time, we get Mike Dunleavy, who I thought is a severely underrated Clipper coach. So, I get what year was that draft that Candy came in?
98 draft. My question is, do we keep them when they're like that after that 5 or 6 years that you're talking about? Does Sterling pay these guys? That's what I'm questioning.
Yeah, and like 5 or 6 years after that is, we have Dunleavy, we have Elton Brand, we wouldn't have had Chris Kaman.
Right.
I mean, maybe we would have, I don't know. But
We
anyway,
probably
like
wouldn't have had Chris Kaman. I agree.
yeah. We get to the playoffs that 2006. Maybe we get to the playoffs earlier for sure. And maybe it's
Right.
a different look team. But I think like if you take Dirk Nowitzki and build around him, especially because we had in 2000 that not soon after in 2001, that 2001-2002 season, we had the youngest starting 5 in the NBA with the Knuckleheads. So imagine the Knuckleheads and Dirk. Oh my God.
Oh,
or
man.
the Knuckleheads and Vince.
We're getting the playoffs for sure.
Oh, for sure.
Now, do we win a series? I'm not sure, but at that point, we don't really care, right? We're just happy to be in the playoffs. As far as Olowakandi goes, I will say this for Clipper fans. It is a tough what if, but I would say not to be too bitter about it anymore because I really just don't trust Sterling to keep a long-term winning product going. Although in terms of Lob City, it seemed like maybe he had turned the corner on that. Maybe. What did you think of that?
Well, like it's crazy because like you take a look at Dunleavy, you take a look at Doc Rivers. Okay, so Diamond Don Sterling hires those guys, but then he does it kind of on the cheap because, for example, Doc was the coach, but he was also the president. He was the GM. He was the night watchman, and he was the valet. Like he had like 7 or 8 jobs for the Clippers.
Right, we made him the president of everything.
Yeah, so like, and I want to say Dunleavy was the same thing. So it's like Dunleavy and Doc kind of got through to Sterling with building around teams, and Sterling still did it on the cheap, but he listened to Dunleavy and he listened to Doc for the most part. Like Dunleavy, it was the one who built around DeAndre and Blake. And then Doc got there and we had Chris Paul, and he like, I remember I was at the first media day that Doc was at, and this was still under Sterling's reign of terror. And the very first player that Doc Rivers mentioned was DeAndre Jordan, and he kept referring to them as the big 3. I always thought that was pretty brilliant of Doc Rivers to instill all this confidence into DJ, and he created a first team all NBA center. And I think that was all Doc Rivers' leadership, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, Donald Sterling, maybe would have screwed it up a little, but he actually kind of listened to Doc and Dunleavy. So I don't know, man.
Who knows? And then another one, brief one. This was never really going to happen, but me being a kid that had heard everything about Sterling and the Olowakandi situation, when we got the number 1 pick in the lottery in 2009, I legitimately was fearful that we would pick Hasheem Thabeet first overall because Donald Sterling wanted to lose. Because my uncle was like, as long as Donald Sterling's your owner, you're never going to win anything. So you're just torturing yourself as a fan. And me, now I'm 10 years old and I'm already I'm here for life. Oh my God, this is breaking news to me. That Donald Sterling is this cheapskate. So I'm scared that we're going to take Hasheem Thabeet. Thank God we didn't. Had we taken Hasheem Thabeet, we probably never get Chris Paul. Who knows where we are now? Legitimately, that's such a big one. If we don't take Blake Griffin, I don't know where we are right now.
Yeah, but then you look at that draft class, and it's got James Harden, and it's got Steph Curry
what if
in
we
it.
Take another guy that's not Hasheem Thabeet from that draft?
Yeah, I look. If we take Hasheem Thabeet, we're not the team to beat. Okay, I just had to say that. But we do take Blake Griffin, which you obviously take because he was a force. And then, of course, what happens? He has some dumb injury in preseason, and we get this rookie season of him just sitting on the sidelines observing, and we don't get a real rookie season for him until a year later. So, and Alex, I know Steph Curry was a bit of a glass Joe coming into the league, but obviously this is the NBA's greatest shooter of all time. And then big butt James Harden, we might actually get him this season. We'll see. But the team goes in a way different trajectory if either one of those guards are picked instead of Big Blake.
And maybe still a good one. It's just that we definitely don't get Chris Paul in that way. Maybe we go for someone else, but Steph Curry, I mean, it could have been great. Who knows? But I don't regret the Blake Griffin thing. Do you?
No, but Blake Griffin, it's funny. I look back at Lob City, and for some reason, Blake is just above all blame. I don't blame him for any of it. I blame Doc. I blame Chris Paul. I blame Sterling. I blame DeAndre. I just don't blame Blake in any way, even though.
Even the fourth quarter of Game 6 in 2015, where he was having such a great game, and then he just.
Oh my! But the whole team.
True, it's not just him, but
it wasn't just him.
Of course not. Of course,
I get it. But Chris Paul couldn't score. DeAndre Jordan couldn't score. Who else did we have? We had what's his name?
And Barnes just went cold. And Redick, Barnes, and Crawford, they all went cold.
It was brutal. That was the worst home game experience of my life. It was like a funeral. It was just like. The only other time it was as quiet in that gym at Staples Center, that horrible hockey stadium that we only have to suffer through for one more season. The only time it was more quiet and more like horrible was when Shaun Livingston broke. I was there when that happened. I literally walked into the arena. I was running a little late. It happened, I want to say, in the first quarter. And all of a sudden,
hold that thought for a sec, because coming up, we're going to be talking about the big injury what ifs in Clipper history, and Shaun Livingston is definitely on the list. Going to be talking about those coming up. I'll tell you a little something about Bird Dogs. Bird Dogs stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. Bird Dog shorts do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but fit way better. They fit way better than regular shorts that are made of a stiff, restricting cotton. And so you can use them for anything. You can use them to garden. You can use them to do athletic activity, even just walking around your house. The whole point of Bird Dogs is to make you feel comfortable and, of course, make you look good. And Bird Dogs use anti-stink sweat wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long. Bird Dogs invented a cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki but stretches, so you get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. Just go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA or enter promo code LockedOnNBA at checkout for a free Bird Dogs water bottle with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA for a free water bottle at checkout. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you. All right. So before we get into the injuries real quick, there's one more of a draft one, very recent, that affects our current team that I want to ask you about. Jerome Robinson getting picked in the lottery in 2018 draft. We could have taken MPJ alongside Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
Now, you mean NBA champion Michael Porter Jr.? NBA champion.
And
he gets a ring.
NBA and all NBA first teamer Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So we take
not only that, but MPJ won a ring with teammates DeAndre Jordan and Reggie Jackson.
Unbelievable.
I know.
So MPJ didn't play that first year, did he? In 18-19?
I don't believe so. He was like a glass Joe, so it was like a roll of the dice. But then Jerome Robinson was just horrible for us.
He's just not a good enough NBA player. So let's say we take MPJ. Let's say he misses that entire first year. Do we use him in the Paul George trade instead of like Gallinari or something?
Right.
Would the Thunder have taken a risk on that? What do you think if you're the Thunder? Do you take a risk on that? And do you think the Clippers would have offered him up with SGA? Say we picked both, and
I mean the Thunder clearly wanted SGA all day SGA, right? So and then we threw in Gallinari, we threw in 25 picks, we threw in Clipper Darrell's Clippermobile. Who were there other players involved in that? I know it was like 7 picks. Danilo, Shai, right?
Maybe we keep one pick, give them MPJ. I don't know. But let's say we kept MPJ. Do you think MPJ fits into the 2-1-3 era? Maybe off the bench as a small forward or something. Like, who do we have in that role when we first got Kawhi and Paul George? Did we have a backup wing? Because Mo Harkless started.
Right. You're absolutely right. Mo Harkless did start.
That think of a backup wing.
Dude, that first season is such a haze because of stupid COVID. Right. So that was like that phantom season where we didn't have 82 games, and then all of a sudden the season stops, and then we sit on it for 3-4 months, and then we go back to the bubble with all that nonsense.
Right.
But I'll tell you, like, usually one plays two in the conference finals. Every now and again, a 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 sneaks in. And I know, obviously, just recently an 8 seed got all the way to the NBA finals, but lost to a 1 seed. But that bubble year, L-Word, the other LA team, was number 1. We were number 2. And that was the conference finals that should have happened.
Right.
And could have happened
easily could have.
If the NBA, it could have happened as is in the bubble,
right.
if like Paul George doesn't have an emotional breakdown, although he was better in round 2.
Yeah.
Why do you think we lost round 2 up 3-1? Is it just like Clipper curse? Is it Doc Rivers nonsense where he doesn't make adjustments?
I think it was, I thought it was Clipper curse, but then we got over that second round curse in the next year. So I think we conquered it. I think it felt like Houston all over again. That game 6 we just referenced, where literally there was just a lid on the basket at the worst time. Like nobody, It's like everyone forgot how to make shots. The most surprising thing to me was Kawhi not hitting shots, because he was the crutch that I was leaning on, that he's going to bring his championship, aura. And he did in the first round, like against Dallas. It looked like we were in trouble sometimes, and Kawhi just shut everything down.
Yeah.
So Paul George was clearly not in the right headspace, but the lack of adjustments from Glenn Rivers for sure was tough. And then Kawhi just missing everything. Lou Williams missing everything. And I also think Montrez, coming from, his grandma passing away and not having games, he wasn't in a rhythm in any way. And he was very important for us that season. But that matchup just wasn't for him anyway. So I think it also became a lack of, like, it felt like the whole regular season we were kind of getting by on talent, because Paul George missed a ton of games, or like not a ton, but 24 games out of 72. That's like a third of the season?
100%.
So Lou Williams,
we had no chemistry.
Right, but we were getting by because Lou and Montrez had chemistry, and they'd come off the bench for 40 points every night. And that
was the year that Trez won 6th man of the year, right?
Right. Yeah, who knows? I mean, the injuries, though, we can go all the way back to the 80s and all that, but let's go with someone a little more recent, and I'm going to start with Shaun Livingston, because that's one that I got to experience as a fan. That's a huge what if for me, because Sam Cassell was aging. It was all being set up for Shaun Livingston to take over and be our starting point guard.
Absolutely.
2007 season, he gets hurt. What do you think would be the case for Shaun and that Clipper team had he not gotten hurt?
So him and Sam Cassell were such a great 1-2 punch of point guards when you have the savvy veteran psychological mind game champion that is Sam Cassell. Obviously, I think he won 2 rings in his first 2 seasons in the NBA, and then he won a ring in his final season in Boston. Like, it's just, the guy is charmed. So he was 100% the nucleus to that 2006 playoff team. It was all his leadership, and Shaun Livingston backing him up as this extra long, extra tall, kind of SGA like point guard was a wonderful backup fit, and they could actually play on the floor together as well. And then I want to say Shaun Livingston gets injured the next season, right? Like it's 2007. And he's not the same after. Like he almost got knocked out of the league after that injury. It took him a while to get back, and then obviously he's a multi-champion, just like Sam Cassell, as a bench guy for the Warriors. So like that season, that was one of the very toughest seasons for me as a fan, that follow-up 2006-2007 season, because we were over 500 for the majority of the season, and we kind of fell apart late, and we fell out of the playoffs. We let Sam Cassell go. He goes and wins a ring with Boston. Like, it was just so depressing, because you thought, oh my God, we actually won a playoff series. Last year we won a playoff series. We've got all these pieces. I really like Coach Mike Dunleavy. I thought he was great. I thought Elton Brand and Chris Kaman as the highest scoring rebounding tandem in the NBA. Those were a good 1-2 punch. And like I said, Sam Cassell and Shaun Livingston, great. We had Vlad Radmanovic from 3. But like it just, Livingston gets injured. We let Cassell go. The whole Cat Mobley, like we had the pieces. It just all fell apart. And that season was so frustrating. So I became a season ticket holder in 2002. We didn't start winning. Like, we didn't start becoming a winning organization until 10 years later. We only had like one winning season in my first 10 years. It was absolutely brutal. And the hardest pill to swallow was that one after the 06 playoff run.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that 07 season being kind of depressing, because when I became a fan in the middle of that 06 season, my first season as a Clipper fan, I see us get to the second round. So I don't understand fully at that time what it really means to be a Clipper fan and constantly miss the playoffs.
Oh,
So that
you
was
learned, young man.
I learned. And I remember watching that last game against the New Orleans Hornets on the regular season that year. And I remember crying, even though it had already been established in the middle of that game that we weren't going to make the playoffs because the We Believe Warriors. And you know what? Granted, if we were going to miss the playoffs, they represented the 8th seed well, Golden State, by beating Dallas. I don't think we would have beaten Dallas, because the Warriors just had a great matchup with them, and they had that.
Yeah, but we should have had Dirk.
Right, exactly. The Warriors had that special matchup with them, and they had that trade in the middle of the season that got them Al Harrington and Steven Jackson for Mike Dunleavy and Troy Murphy. That was a really good trade. And so that was a tough season, a tough pill to swallow. The question is, do you think we make it over We Believe if Shaun Livingston doesn't get hurt? Because he plays 54 games. He misses like the last 28 games of the season. Elton Brand is still averaging 20 points, 9 rebounds. Do you think we would have – let me see how many more wins the Warriors had than us. We had 40 wins, 42 losses, and the Golden State Warriors had –
it's got to be right there.
It was only 2-win difference, man.
We were right. We were right there. We were 7 or 8 the vast majority of the season, and then towards the end, the final 20 games, we kind of fell off and went down to 9, and it was just so brutal.
Yeah,
40 Lakers and 42 is horrible.
And Lakers are only 42 and 40 as well. So the 8 and 7 seeds had the same record there.
Right there.
In 08, though, and then Shaun Livingston, because Elton tore his Achilles. Shaun Livingston may have been our best player going into that season, if you think about it. Either him or Chris Kaman, right?
Right. So, yeah, and that, dude, I went to some fan event where Elton Brand literally looked us in the eyes and apologized for missing the entire season. And he's like, next year is going to be different. I'm coming back, I promise. And then we get Baron Davis in the offseason. And then, like, I don't know, a half an hour later, Elton Brand goes to Philadelphia.
Do you think without Shaun Livingston, had Elton Brand, let's say Shaun Livingston had still gotten hurt, but Elton Brand didn't, do you think our run to making the playoffs was kind of over?
Well, obviously we all know now that Sterling was horrible and everybody was uncomfortable because you look at EB and we acquired him from Chicago, right? We didn't draft him. So it's like we actually brought him to LA, made him a star. Guys are wearing Clippers jerseys and rap videos for like the first time ever. We're kind of a hot team because of the knuckleheads. That kind of fizzles out because of a bad trade. We should have never let Darius Miles go for Andre Miller's worst season ever after his father passed, which was, I get it, it was a personal thing. But we actually had some heat, and then we made Elton Brand like, you're the face of our franchise. But he left, so like if he had stuck around, if we had a Ballmer back then, obviously everything's different. But if Elton Brand had stuck around and really been the face of our franchise and we hung number 42 in the rafters, a lot of things could have gone very, very differently. And I think Dunleavy was a good coach for EB. They did partner him up with some good role players. It just never worked. The closest it ever worked was 06. And then that Achilles season was brutal. And then he leaves. And then he never does anything anywhere else. Unless I'm wrong.
He was done. No, he just wasn't the same player after that injury. But coming up, going to talk about a couple of more recent injuries in Clipper history and then some almost trades. And I think you guys know what we're referring to when I say that. Going to be talking about that coming up. I got to tell you a little something about DoorDash. I use DoorDash all the time because sometimes I'm just working and I don't feel like going out of the house to get food because I need to upload an episode at a certain time, or I just literally don't feel like leaving the house because I'm either lazy or just tired. And just sometimes things aren't very convenient. But you know what is convenient? DoorDash. DoorDash brings the meal that you want right to your doorstep. With drivers everywhere and a bunch of restaurant choices around your area, DoorDash gets you what you need when you need without you having to even get off your butt. Get 50% off your first DoorDash order up to a $20 value when you use code LOCKEDONNBA at checkout. Limited time offer. Terms apply. That's 50% off, up to $20, no minimum subtotal, and 0 delivery fees on your first order when you download the DoorDash app in the App Store and enter code LOCKEDONNBA. Don't forget, that's code LOCKEDONNBA for 50% off your first order with DoorDash. All right. So more recent history when it comes to injuries. There was the Blake Griffin one, but I don't think that ended up being too big a deal because of the way he ended up playing in his rookie season anyway. And so
his rookie season was phenomenal. He's rookie of the year. He's an all-star. He wins the slam dunk contest. We actually were the highest selling road team in the NBA, Blake Griffin's rookie season, because everybody around the country wanted to see this kid come in and dunk. And so we were the highest selling road act in the NBA that year.
Let me ask you this one. How about in 2015? Remember the first couple of games of the Rockets series, Chris Paul was out, but we still split. Do you think that injury affected? Because I know some people use that injury as a reason why, Chris Paul maybe didn't come through as much as we would have wanted him to in game 6. But do you think that that's a little bit much given that we had the 3-1 lead, even given the injury?
Well, I mean, look, we're so used to Chris Paul getting busted up in the postseason. You just kind of have to work around him. And then when he's there, obviously he's the point guard, but that's just part of who he is. I mean, I got a big what if for you, Dime, that's going to make your brains shoot out of your ears. What if the NBA Board of Governors or the owners or what have you doesn't interfere and Chris Paul goes to the L word and plays with Kobe Bryant and we never have Lob City? Like what if that happens, Dime?
Well, if that happens, the trade that we made for Mo Williams ends up being much worse because we could have had Kyrie Irving and then we wouldn't have had him. So that what if people use what if we hadn't traded Baron Davis for Mo Williams? But in my opinion, getting Chris Paul at that time would have been more wins than Kyrie Irving with Blake Griffin. That's
100%.
Right.
100%.
So you agree. And Mo Williams was, in my opinion, fantastic as a sixth man in that 2012 season. Like he was so great in the playoffs.
Agreed.
I love Mo Williams.
I love Mo Williams too.
I think that ended up being okay. But if we don't get Chris Paul, that trade ends up looking way worse. And I mean, we would have been, what pick did we have in 2011? Did we have the pick?
2011.
No, we would have gotten the first pick, right? That's Kyrie Irving's draft. We would have gotten the first pick.
It was 20. So whoa. We had Blake Griffin first pick, right? He gets injured. Okay.
So we would have had the first pick back-to-back years.
Do you think that CP and Kobe would have won a ring together? I don't think they would have.
I don't know, because the thing is, Laker fans seem sold that they would have, of course. But it's, as a kid, I was more hesitant about Kobe, but now I'm a little more hesitant about CP.
Oh, 100%. Kobe saw Chris Paul continuously not get us to the promised land or anywhere close to the promised land year after year.
And one thing about Chris I learned during that period is that he wanted to be the guy. He wanted the ball in his hands a lot. And it wasn't Phil Jackson in the triangle. So I don't know who would have been their coach.
I'm going to push back a little on the Kyrie Irving thing, because obviously we all know, Kyrie Irving kind of can be a headache based on past drama. However, I do know for a fact that when CP3 joined the team, there was actually a lot of hostility in that locker room, and Chris Paul was kind of drawing a line in the sand, and you were either on Chris Paul's side or you were on Blake and DJ's side. And the vast majority of the team went on to Chris Paul's side, but now he's ostracizing DeAndre Jordan and Blake Griffin. I heard from a couple of sources that Blake Griffin kept saying, like, why does everyone blame me? Like, and he was literally feeling the weight of the world. Like, why does everyone blame me? And I don't think they should have blamed. They could have partially blamed him, but a lot to do was with Chris Paul. Chris Paul had a big chip on his shoulder. Chris Paul was upset that he's 5'11", but he's listed as 6 feet tall. And we all know he's 5'11". He knows he's 5'11". I'm 5'10". And when I look at him, it's eye to eye. Okay. But anyway, like, he wasn't a great locker room guy, Chris Paul. Not as good as like a Patrick Beverley, for example.
Right.
And obviously Chris Paul's a more talented point guard than Pat Beverley, but in the locker room, he was not the best. And there was like a romper room feel in the locker room. There was all the players brought their kids in the locker room. It was not a championship caliber locker room. The locker room of Doc Rivers' Celtics with Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen. I guarantee you they didn't have freaking kids and their toys in the locker room spread out on the floor. They didn't feel like a championship caliber team when I was there. And I think that's a lot to do with Chris Paul. So say we get a Kyrie Irving to feed to the young guns. Now we're like a younger team with more energy. I think Kyrie buys into Blake and DeAndre's young superstar status where they're, owning Hollywood. Blake Griffin was in like every third commercial for like 2 or 3 years before he punched that guy in Toronto. So like, I don't know. I think Kyrie Irving actually could have been a better fit for Lob City.
Wow. So, I mean, the thing is, though, sadly, if we don't get Chris Paul, we wouldn't have gotten Kyrie anyway because of the pick. So
Right,
we would have
fair
been in
enough.
the gutter. We would have been in the gutter. But
somebody would have come. Somebody would, because people wanted to come to the Clippers to play with Blake Griffin. They really did.
Right.
We would have gotten somebody.
That would have been interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it was great the way it worked out. Like, obviously, people have their feelings about Chris Paul now, but it was special when it happened. And he was arguably the best point guard in the league when we got him. And he surely was, in my opinion, in the 2014. No, never mind. 2014-15, I'd say Steph Curry. But right after, it would be Chris Paul.
Yo, who is the guy that came up with Chris Paul? Like Darren Williams or something? Like, remember that point guard? Everyone was like, oh, it's either Chris Paul or I think it was
I looked up
Darren
Williams. I wore number 8 in elementary school. I wore number 8 because of Darren Williams. He was my favorite.
He kind of fizzled, man.
He totally did.
He went away. He faded away.
Absolutely. Let's talk a couple more injury ones that we left off the table. The obvious. Kawhi Leonard against the Jazz.
Ugh.
We beat the Jazz. We beat the Suns. My question is, do we beat the Milwaukee Bucks in the finals?
100%. I mean, Kawhi had just beaten the Milwaukee Bucks in the finals as a Raptor. So in the Eastern Conference Finals,
better Milwaukee Bucks though. They have Drew Holiday now instead of Bledsoe.
Yeah, but like we were a team of destiny that year. We like that. You were at that game when Terrence Mann turned it on. That was the greatest home Clipper game ever. And I don't think it's not even. I don't even know what would be a close second. Maybe Game 7 versus second. Spurs.
Yeah, that one. That was amazing.
Yeah,
Game 7
yeah.
Spurs.
But Game 6 Jazz is like exponentially higher than Game 7 round 1. Just because we got to the Western Conference Finals, and also the comeback was absolutely nasty. Yeah, and the crowd, by the way, best crowd like of all time. I by the way, hats off to Clipper Nation. We are such better fans than we were, and obviously, 12 winning seasons does this, but everybody but us thinks we're a bunch of jerks and we're laughing stocks and we're cursed and we'll never win anything. However, Clipper Nation, we're now literally used to winning regular season games, especially in that building at home. So we have been phenomenal fans, rowdy, loud, a great bunch. Keep it up. Only 41 regular home season games left in the hockey crapperia, and we're going to go to the Dome. Oh my God, I can't wait. I cannot wait. Are you going to sit in that wacky fan wall section behind right? We both got to get in there.
Yeah, exactly. But Chris, let everybody know where they can find you. This is always great. Taking a trip down memory lane. You know a lot about Clipper history compared to, especially recent history, compared to most folks. You definitely have that feel of somebody that has been to games for so many years. I can tell because I always know what people of that demographics say about the Clips and their gaming experience and stuff like that.
I've been at basically every home game for the past 22 years. So I am very much looking forward to getting into that Dome Suite Dome in a place that is ours. So you can find me at LA Clipcast on IG, at LA Clipcast on the artist formerly known as Twitter X. You can listen to the show Clipcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Please subscribe, give us 5 stars. And Locked On Clipcast is my favorite crossover event of the year. I love doing Locked On Clipcasts.
There we go. Locked On Clippers, free and available. All your favorite podcast platforms. Make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know every single time we post a video. 5 days a week, all things LA Clippers. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DimeDropperPod and subscribe to my own YouTube channel for even more NBA and LA Clipper content. The age-old proverb continues. Go Clippers.
82-0 this season.